The grand, wrought iron gates of London have stood for centuries as the ultimate symbol of an unbroken heritage, a silent witness to the rise and fall of empires, the changing of eras, and the deep-seated traditions of a nation wrapped in pageantry. For generations, one specific address has captured the imagination of the global public more than any other, serving as the literal and figurative heart of a kingdom. When people across the globe think of majesty, elegance, and the ultimate seat of sovereign authority, their minds inevitably turn to the sprawling stone facade, the iconic balcony, and the pristine gravel courtyards of Buckingham Palace. It is a structure that has transcended its physical reality as a mere building to become an enduring monument of statecraft, a physical manifestation of continuity in a rapidly shifting world. For nearly 200 years, since a young queen first walked through its doors to establish her court, it has been the definitive home of the ruler, the place where history is made behind closed doors, and where the standard flies high to signal the presence of the leader of the realm. To the world outside, those stone walls represented an impenetrable sanctuary of tradition, a place where the private lives of an extraordinary family intersected with the heavy machinery of governance. Every tourist gathering along the sweeping boulevard of the Mall does so with a singular hope, looking up at the windows and wondering about the daily routines, the quiet moments, and the heavy responsibilities of the figures who inhabit those historic rooms. It has always been understood that to hold the highest office in the land meant occupying this ultimate symbol of power, anchoring the identity of the capital city around the daily presence of the crown. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of ancient ceremonies and the rhythmic precision of the changing guards, profound shifts have been quietly taking place, threatening to alter the very fabric of how this institution operates. Before we delve deeper into the astonishing transformation currently unfolding within these historic walls and explore what it means for the future of a global legacy, take a brief moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an exclusive look inside world history. The grandeur of this sprawling monument has always demanded an immense level of dedication, not just in terms of emotional reverence, but through staggering financial and structural upkeep. Over the decades, the wear and tear on a building of this historic magnitude becomes a monumental challenge, requiring a delicate balance between preserving ancient architecture and updating infrastructure for a modern era. The world watched with a mixture of awe and curiosity when a massive, highly publicized restoration project was launched, funded heavily by the public purse, to ensure that the iconic structure would survive for generations to come. With an astronomical price tag reaching hundreds of millions of pounds, the decade-long undertaking was framed as an absolute necessity to prevent catastrophic failure, protect priceless art collections, and secure the home of the sovereign. Millions of citizens watched as scaffolding rose along the wings, and precious historical artifacts were carefully cataloged and moved, all under the impression that this monumental effort was designed to prepare the private quarters for its current and future occupants. It was presented as a grand renewal, a breathtaking investment in the ultimate symbol of national identity, ensuring that the grand traditions established in the 19th century would continue seamlessly into the 21st. Day after day, specialized craftsmen, engineers, and historians labored within the labyrinthine corridors, replacing ancient wiring, stabilizing crumbling masonry, and restoring majestic drawing rooms to their former glory. The narrative surrounding this colossal effort was clear. It was about maintaining the beating heart of the state, preserving the exact spaces where historic decisions were made and where the royal family lived out their private lives away from the public gaze. But as the extensive multi-year project neared its final stages, rumors began to circulate within the corridors of power, whispering of a radical departure from centuries of established protocol. Observers noticed that the official declarations regarding the future layout of the building began to carry a subtle shift in tone, moving away from absolute certainties toward a more ambiguous presentation of how the space would ultimately be utilized. The public, having watched the steady transformation of the exterior and the massive expenditure of national resources, naturally assumed that the conclusion of the works would mark a grand return to normalcy, symbolized by the permanent presence of the leader within those newly reinforced walls. There is an undeniable magic associated with the idea of a living palace, a place where the lights in the windows signify that the highest authority in the land is actively residing within, managing the affairs of state from their historical home. This continuity has always been the bedrock of the institution's public appeal, creating a tangible link between the physical geography of London and the mystical nature of sovereignty. When a leader resides in the heart of the capital, it grounds the entire apparatus of governance in a specific location, turning a historical monument into a vibrant, breathing entity rather than a cold museum. The massive financial investment was justified precisely on these grounds, as a vital preservation of a functional living heritage site that defined the architectural and cultural landscape of the nation. Yet, the unfolding reality behind the scenes has started to paint a completely different picture, one that challenges long-held assumptions about the relationship between the ruler and the historic residence. For months, subtle clues have emerged from official financial reviews and brief statements issued by high-ranking administrators, suggesting that the massive restoration was hiding a far more profound administrative reorganization. The true nature of this shift is only now coming to light, sending shockwaves through traditionalists and rewriting the future of the most famous address in the world. It raises fundamental questions about what happens to a symbol of power when its traditional occupants choose a different path, and how an ancient institution adapts to the pressures of a modern, transparent society. The tension between historical preservation and practical utility has reached a breaking point, forcing a complete reassessment of the purpose of these grand taxpayer-funded spaces. As the scaffolding slowly comes down and the restored wings are revealed in all their architectural splendor, the stark realization is setting in that the physical restoration was merely a prelude to a much larger, unprecedented structural change. The public is left to grapple with a fascinating paradox, a historical treasure completely revitalized at an immense public cost, yet fundamentally transformed in its core purpose. The stage is set for a dramatic revelation that will redefine the identity of the capital, alter the patterns of royal life, and mark the definitive end of an era that many assumed would last forever. The veil of secrecy was finally lifted during the presentation of the annual financial review, a highly anticipated event that senior officials had promised would deliver an unprecedented level of transparency to the public. As reporters and observers gathered to examine the detailed ledgers of the royal estate, the keeper of the privy purse, James Chalmers, stepped forward to deliver an announcement that would permanently alter the public's understanding of the British monarchy. It was officially confirmed that, despite a staggering £369 million of taxpayer funding poured into a comprehensive, decade-long refurbishment, Buckingham Palace will never again serve as the permanent residence of a British monarch. This historic revelation instantly rewrote the future of the nation's most iconic building, sending a clear signal that the centuries-old tradition of the sovereign living in the heart of London has come to an end. King Charles III and Queen Camilla have made the definitive decision not to move into the palace, even when the massive restoration project officially concludes next year. Instead, the royal couple will remain permanently across the mall at Clarence House, the much smaller, more intimate residence that has served as their London base since 2003. This decision represents a monumental departure from historical precedent, breaking a tradition of full-time residency that dates back nearly 200 years to the era of Queen Victoria. The announcement quickly triggered a wave of intense debate across the country, as citizens and historians alike began to process the reality that the massive private suites, carefully modernized at immense public expense, will stand empty of a full-time resident ruler. To make the shift even more dramatic for the long-term future of the institution, Prince William has already made it clear that he and the Princess of Wales have absolutely no intention of moving into Buckingham Palace when he eventually accedes to the throne. The next generation of the royal family intends to remain firmly established at their private residence, Forest Lodge in Windsor, meaning that the capital city will lose its resident monarch for the foreseeable future. The decision by both the current king and the heir apparent means that Buckingham Palace is transitioning from a historic family home into something fundamentally different, a change that many fear could strip the building of its traditional heart and soul. In an effort to address these mounting concerns and justify the enormous financial investment made by the public, royal aides have scrambled to reframe the purpose of the grand estate. Officials insisted that the palace will remain the undisputed ceremonial and operational center of royal life, describing it as the buzzing hive and definitive headquarters of the monarchy. The entire administrative apparatus of the royal household will remain fully functional within the building, ensuring that state visits, official audiences, investitures, and grand garden parties will continue to be hosted on its historic grounds. The king will continue to travel to the palace on a daily basis when he is working in London, using it as his primary office and meeting space throughout the day. The only practical difference, according to senior staff, is that at the end of a long working day, the monarch will simply walk next door to sleep at Clarence House, rather than retiring to the private apartments upstairs. To offset the massive £369 million cost of the refit and reduce the ongoing burden on the taxpayer, the Crown has announced a radical plan to open the doors of Buckingham Palace to the general public on a scale never seen before. By significantly increasing public access to the magnificent staterooms, the historic drawing rooms, and the sprawling gardens, the estate hopes to generate a massive, self-sustaining stream of commercial income. For example, rooms like the famous Yellow Drawing Room, which has been meticulously restored to its original 19th century color scheme, will now be viewable by thousands of tourists, showcasing the incredible craftsmanship funded by the public purse. While this commercial pivot is a triumph for accessibility and financial modernization, it has inevitably sparked deep anxiety among traditionalists who worry that the palace will lose its international cachet. Critics argue that without a monarch living within its walls day in and day out, the iconic landmark risks being perceived as just another glorified history-themed office block. The magic of the palace has always been tied to the presence of the sovereign, a reality symbolized by the royal standard flying high above the roof. Officials have countered these fears by assuring the public that the standard will still fly proudly whenever the king is working inside the building, maintaining the visual link between the ruler and the capital. Yet, this administrative compromise reveals a deeper truth about the changing nature of the modern monarchy, showing a desire to streamline operations and create a clear boundary between public duty and private life. The decision is heavily influenced by the personal preferences of King Charles, who at 77 years old and continuing his ongoing treatment for cancer, finds the smaller, more comfortable environment of Clarence House far more suitable than the cavernous, drafty galleries of the main palace. The massive restoration project was originally launched during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, who herself made no secret of her strong dislike for living above the shop in London, preferring the historic comfort of Windsor Castle. The late Queen actually spent her last night at Buckingham Palace on March 18, 2020, before decamping to Berkshire at the start of the global pandemic. She never returned to sleep in her private quarters, as the rapidly accelerating building works had rendered her personal suite of rooms completely uninhabitable. The extensive renovations were undeniably critical, given that vast sections of the palace had not been structurally touched since the end of the Second World War. Behind the beautiful gilded mirrors and historic oil paintings, the building's infrastructure was dangerously crumbling, leaving the estate vulnerable to catastrophic fires or devastating water damage from ancient plumbing systems. The decision to leave the sovereign's private quarters for the final phase of the 10-year project was made out of deep respect for the late Queen's advanced age, ensuring she would not be disrupted by the chaos of construction. At the beginning of the reservicing program, royal officials consistently assured the public that the monarch would undoubtedly return to live at the historic seat of power once the dust settled and the builders departed. However, as the years rolled on and the sheer scale of the financial investment became a matter of intense public scrutiny, those confident assurances began to subtly waver. Official statements shifted from definitive promises to cautious expressions of intent, reflecting a growing internal consensus that the traditional lifestyle of the court was no longer sustainable or practical in the modern era. The king's long-held philosophical belief in a more streamlined, cost-effective, and transparent institution ultimately drove the decision to permanently alter the palace's role, balancing the preservation of a national heritage asset with the practical demands of a changing society. To truly understand the profound magnitude of this historic shift, one must look closely at the remarkable personalities and the complex biographies of the individuals driving this quiet revolution at the heart of the British state. King Charles III, who ascended the throne at an advanced age following the record-breaking reign of his mother, has spent his entire adult life preparing for the heavy responsibilities of kingship while simultaneously cultivating a highly distinct philosophical approach to the institution he now leads. Born in Buckingham Palace itself in 1948, his early life was entirely defined by the traditional, rigid structures of the post-war court, an environment that was as grand as it was isolating. Over the decades, as the Prince of Wales, he developed a profound passion for architectural preservation, environmental sustainability, and fiscal responsibility, often advocating for a more streamlined and practical approach to managing the vast estates of the crown. His personal connection to Clarence House, the elegant stucco building designed by John Nash, where he has resided since 2003, is deeply rooted in family history. It was once the beloved home of his grandmother, the Queen Mother, and it represents a space where he has been able to create a genuine, comfortable sanctuary away from the crushing weight of public duty. Now at 77 years old and managing a highly publicized battle with cancer, the king's decision to remain at Clarence House is both a pragmatic health consideration and the ultimate fulfillment of his lifelong vision for a modernized, self-funding monarchy. His choice is fully supported by Queen Camilla, whose own life journey from a private citizen to the consort of the sovereign has given her a unique appreciation for the value of privacy, comfort, and domestic normalcy. By choosing to commute across the mall for work rather than living above the shop, the royal couple is establishing a new model for contemporary constitutional rulers, separating the public office from the private home. This forward-looking philosophy is mirrored even more dramatically in the choices of the next generation of the royal family, who are actively rewriting the rules of engagement between the sovereign and the public. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has consistently signaled that his tenure as leader will look vastly different from the ancient patterns established by his ancestors. Born in 1982, William grew up under the intense glare of the global media spotlight, experiencing firsthand the immense pressures that traditional royal life can inflict on personal and family well-being. Together with his wife, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, he has made the conscious, deliberate choice to prioritize stability, privacy, and a relatively normal upbringing for their 3 young children. Their decision to remain permanently at Forest Lodge in Windsor, rather than moving to the capital when William eventually takes the throne, represents a complete geographical and cultural decoupling of the sovereign from London. It is a stunning declaration that the future king believes his duties can be discharged effectively, without occupying the traditional palace, utilizing modern technology and decentralized operations to maintain a strong connection with the nation. This generational shift reflects a broader trend among contemporary European royal houses, where rulers are increasingly abandoning sprawling, drafty historic monuments in favor of modest, practical residences that reflect the values of the societies they represent. The historical context of Buckingham Palace itself provides a fascinating backdrop to this modern transformation, illustrating how the building's purpose has constantly evolved to meet the political and social realities of different eras. Originally built as a grand townhouse for the Duke of Buckingham in the early 18th century, the structure was acquired by King George III in 1761 as a private retreat for his wife, Queen Charlotte, earning it the affectionate nickname of the Queen's House. It was not until the spectacular accession of Queen Victoria in 1837 that the palace officially became the definitive permanent residence of the British sovereign in London. Victoria, alongside her husband, Prince Albert, oversaw massive architectural expansions, including the construction of the famous East Wing and the creation of the iconic central balcony that has served as the stage for countless moments of national celebration and unity. For nearly 2 centuries, the palace stood as an absolute fortress of imperial power and family life, surviving the devastating aerial bombardments of the Second World War, during which King George VI and Queen Elizabeth famously refused to leave London, standing in solidarity with their citizens. However, as the 21st century advanced, the staggering logistical and financial challenges of maintaining a 19-acre estate with 775 rooms became increasingly difficult to justify in an era demanding total financial transparency. The staggering £369 million resurfacing project, which successfully replaced miles of dangerous, decades-old wiring and crumbling lead pipes, was a vital rescue mission for a national heritage asset. But it also forced a fundamental reckoning about the building's ultimate utility. By transitioning Buckingham Palace into a premier cultural landmark and maximizing public access, the institution is opening up its most sacred spaces to the global public, allowing visitors to walk through the magnificent staterooms and appreciate the incredible collections of art that were previously hidden behind closed doors. This bold commercial pivot ensures that the palace can generate the vast sums required for its ongoing maintenance, transforming it from a heavy financial burden on the taxpayer into a self-sustaining engine of cultural tourism. Related historical events, such as the gradual opening of Windsor Castle and Holyrood House in Edinburgh, demonstrate that a royal residence does not lose its majesty or its constitutional importance simply because it welcomes the public. Rather, it gains a new layer of relevance and affection in the hearts of the people. The decision to maintain a Buckingham Palace as a fully operational monarchy HQ ensures that the heavy machinery of the state will continue to run with the exact same precision as before, preserving the grand ceremonies, the international diplomatic receptions, and the historic investitures that define the nation's global identity. The royal standard will continue to catch the wind above the roof whenever the king is present for his daily meetings, providing a powerful visual anchor for the thousands of spectators who gather outside the gates. Ultimately, this historic reorganization is not an abdication of tradition, but a profound and necessary act of preservation, a brilliant adaptation that secures the survival of an ancient institution by aligning it with the practical realities, the economic demands, and the egalitarian values of a rapidly changing modern